Okay, so let's dive into that. The legal solution. Now, how many of you seen this Pixar movie, Up? Have you all seen this? It's rated G, so I can recommend it to anybody. It is wonderful. It's delightful, very entertaining. Well, in our seminar last night, or yesterday morning, we got to a point where we were talking about bodily rights. And so in this scene, you have Carl, who is flown off with his house on his way to South America, and he does not know that Russell, the wilderness wanderer, is on his front porch. Russell is there uninvited. So Carl doesn't really want to invite him in. He's a bit of a curmudgeon, but he does, and that's why the rest of the movie is delightful, because he has to put up with Russell. But we use this illustration because it is very much like pregnancy, and it is especially analogous to pregnancy when it is an unwanted, unplanned pregnancy. Carl doesn't want kids. He didn't ask for Russell to be there. Yet he feels that it is his duty to bring him into the house and keep him safe temporarily until the house lands and someone else can take care of this kid. That's very much like pregnancy. So we ask our students then, what if Carl decided to kick Russell off the porch? My house, my choice. My body, my choice. I don't want you to be here. I have the right to refuse the use of my home to you against my will. I'm against slavery. That would be wrong. This is my property. And he kicks him off. At 10,000 feet, Russell the wilderness wanderer is going to wander all the way to the ground and go splat and die. So we ask the students, is that right or is that wrong? And everyone gets, that's wrong. You can't kick him off the porch. That's immoral. That is an incorrect choice. And it's just like abortion. It's just like pregnancy. So to set things up for tonight, I will ask a different question. We all agree that it is wrong to kick Russell off the porch. The next question, though, is, should Carl be in trouble with the law for having done it? What do you think?
Legally, yes.
Legally, yeah. In fact, the authorities would show up. You know, we're looking for Russell. He was confused. He thought he was a Boy Scout. He was a wilderness wanderer. Where did he go? You know, well, I had to kick him off. It was my property. That's not going to fly. Not under the law. Yet under our law, it does fly when it comes to abortion. Okay, so we're going to break it down tonight into these three sections. The legal solution. We need to talk about the rule of law, and we need to talk about political repentance to lay the groundwork to understand the situation that we're currently living in and then how to fix it. Okay? So this ought to take us, I have no idea how long. When we get through these first two acts, we're going to have a break. Because I have a feeling that your brains will be kind of hot from all the information that I'm about to give you. You might need time to process. So at that point, we are going to take a 5-minute bathroom break, get water, come up and ask questions. I'll see what I might need to clarify. Then in the final act, which will be much shorter, obviously, than the first, we will wrap things up with a look at how our governing system works. And therefore, based on what we've learned and this political repentance, we're going to bring in some biblical stories that might be able to inform us where we need to go forward to abolish abortion. And then along the way, I also hope to give you some homework, some things you can do, because again, let's be able to act. Let's be able to do. All right, so let's dive in first with Lex Rex. Lex Rex is Latin, and it means what, homeschool students? Y'all didn't take Latin. You know, I went to a government school, and I can't even do high math, but I had to take 2 years of Latin. If I had to do it all over again, I'd probably rather not do Latin. But I know that lex rex means that the law is king. In other words, it's where we get the concept rule of law. Now, in Western civilization, at least since they made King James sign the Magna Carta, and really it goes back to the Romans and the Greeks, we have been building our societies, our civil societies, on this concept. And that's because we don't want a tyrant lording it over us. We want the law to be above our officials. No one should be above the law. That's how we get justice. That's how we keep things fair. So that's really what the rule of law comes down to. We don't have a king. We don't want a king. The law is our king. And so everyone, even magistrates, are subject to the law. And when I use the word magistrates, which I use a lot, that is just a fancy word for the people in charge, for the officials. So that's legislators, it's governors, it's judges, law enforcement, city, county officials. It doesn't matter the branch of government. If they have some sort of delegated authority, they have magisterial power. Therefore, they are magistrates. And so we use that word to mean that. Okay, let me ask you a question. Should there be a correlation between civil law and moral standards? What do you think? Yes or no? Yes, there should be. There isn't always practically and really, but there definitely should be. This is one of the first questions. This is the first question you should ask any want-to-be politician who's running for an office. And if they look at you cross-eyed and don't know what you're talking about, you probably don't want to support this guy yet till he's read a few of the books that you've given him and educated him about and all this stuff. So yes, of course there should be. There has to be a connection between the absolute moral standard and our civil law. Otherwise, you're going to end up with whose law? What kind of law? Who knows? So God's standard is about justice, okay? It should be based on justice. There are some terms that we use interchangeably, like divine law, natural law, moral law, universal standards. These are all different ways to say the same thing, that there's some standard outside of man that tells us how we should behave. So our civil laws should be based on God's standard of justice. If not, then you get it based on just whatever man wants, which ends up being the will of the people. Now, we hear the will of the people a lot in our republic, and we kind of think that's a good thing by default. But if you think carefully about it, do you really want to live under the will of the people? Because that's just whatever anybody wants. It's majority rule. If 50% of the people plus one say they want your house, they're going to come and take it and say it's the law. That's not the kind of society we really want to live under. That's how you get socialism. And also court opinions end up governing us instead of the absolute standard. So whose law do we want to live under? Our civil laws need to be based on God's law, those universal standards. Otherwise, they end up with man's wants. Now, the reason I put this picture up here for you is to help you understand that civil law is just a subset, a small subset that governs civil society and how we interact with each other. It doesn't encompass all of God's law. Sometimes people accuse people like us of being theocrats, and we just want to regulate and legislate everybody's morality and everything they can do and every decision they can make. No, that's not what we're about at all. We're saying that in our civil society where we live and trade with each other and behave each other and respect each other's lives and property, that our law code needs to be based on a respect for God and His law. So what you see here is that if we legislate something in our civil law, it needs to be based on God's law. We're not going to legislate everything, but when we do, it better be within the scope of God's law. Otherwise, it should be no law at all. Because it has no support, it has no basis or foundation or justification. Those kinds of laws we should fight against, try to overturn, and in some cases we better ignore, because we've been told to obey God and not man. So the purpose of government, as God has spelled it out for us, really, is to protect life and liberty and property. When God says you shall not murder and commit adultery and steal and bear false witness, He's interested in protecting life and liberty and property. Our founding fathers understood that. They spelled it out right in the Declaration of Independence and put safeguards into the Constitution and into state laws. But what does man say with his laws? Man's laws repeatedly assault life, destroy liberty, take property. And so that's the difference if you have the wrong basis. Okay, so what we've got is a situation where innocent babies are dying day by day, 20 to 25 or more per day in Oklahoma, 5,000 to 6,000 a year in Oklahoma, 3,000 plus. I start talking about death, then the music starts. I'm like, wow, that's creepy. Or cool, I don't know. Okay, so we've got the situation where a lot of innocent people are dying. Why is that happening when we all know it's wrong? Well, it's because the remnant, the church, the people of God, have bought into a bunch of lies that our culture tells and bases our civil society on. And so the first thing I want to do is expose some of these lies. And as I do that, it might be a little uncomfortable as you realize, yeah, I was just kind of going along with that. So I hope you don't think that I'm judging you, but let's get to the truth of what's been happening to us. So the legal lies that we've been believing about our law and about our system of government are based on deception, okay? Their number one way they deceive us is by confusing two types of law that are coexisting. So the first type of law is de jure law. More Latin, I'm sorry. Just think jury or justice. De jure law is the real law as it's written in the statutes with its original intent. It's what the law ideally should be because it's what we set down and live by. However, we live in a world that's running around functioning in many, many areas with de facto law. It's just sort of our policy. It may not be written anywhere, but this is the way we do it, right? So understanding this difference is key. So what happens with our members in the media, with our politicians and talking heads and everybody who's talking at us, what they do is they use equivocation to mix up real law with fake law. And you don't even realize it's happening. So do you know the term equivocation? That's when you take two different concepts and you pretend like they're the same things by confusing the words to describe them. Now I'm going to give you a really, really good, clear example of this that's very recent. The leader of the Oklahoma Senate, in a press release just a couple of years ago, had this to say about abortion. He said Roe, as in Roe v. Wade, and Casey, as in Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Roe and Casey are horrible decisions of the U.S. Supreme Court, but I respect the rule of law and the U.S. Constitution and look forward to the day those grave injustices of the court are corrected. Notice the three underlined words. He thinks that what the Supreme Court said was horrible, a horrible decision, and then he equates it or pretends like what they said is the same as the rule of law and the U.S. Constitution. It's right there in his statement. This kind of talking and thinking has been going on for decades. And if no one pulls back the curtain, you don't see the wizard, and you get confused. So let's summarize the legal lies that are based on this confusion right here. If you don't see this right here, then all the rest of these lies just flow right in naturally. What are they? Well, first of all, that court opinions equal the law, flows from that. That we must first change the culture. You hear that quite a lot. So it's not the opinion that's the law itself is the law. And then you get people saying, well, let's just preach the gospel, let's just change the culture, and then things will change. Well, actually, just law changes the culture because it changes people's behavior. You've heard the phrase, fake it till you make it. If you can get people behaving the right way, then they will then begin to start believing and feeling the right things to go with that behavior. And again, the law is a teacher. We've also been told that officials must obey court opinions. Always got to follow these court opinions. But really, officials must obey God and our constitutions. They don't swear to follow court opinions. They swear to follow the Constitution as it's written and by what it means. We've also been told that we can only regulate abortion. This is what the states have been told over and over again. You just regulate it as healthcare, regulate it as healthcare. And if you believe that, then that's all you'll ever try to do, is regulate it instead of criminalize it and abolish it. But abolishing abortion is really the only moral and legal thing to do. So the other thing you hear over and over ad nauseum in every article that references abortion is you'll hear them say that abortion is constitutional. But of course, abortion is unconstitutional. I say of course because it's so plain to me, but in case it's not to you, I'm going to show you here very shortly. But first of all, let me finish going through some of the lies that we have sort of accidentally absorbed and believed. The biggest lie of all that you hear every 4 years and that consumes everyone is that we have to elect a pro-life president who will appoint pro-life justices who will reverse Roe v. Wade. This is the most important presidential election of your life, don't you know? For this reason. Okay, that's a big one. So because that's a big one that so many people get wrapped up in, especially during the presidential elections, let me just pause here for 3 or 4 minutes. Well, not pause, maybe run very quickly, and give you a history lesson on the Supreme Court. What I'm throwing up there now is the Supreme Court in 1972. This is the court that heard the arguments for Roe v. Wade in 1972. The opinion came out, of course, in January 1973. So across the top, you see the presidents that appointed these judges on the court. If you're not colorblind, you can see that some are red and some are blue. The red ones were appointed by Republicans, the blue ones were appointed by Democrats. So here is the decision that came out in 1973. You had 7 saying that we're going to have abortion. What they really said is that it's a medical procedure. It needs to stay private between a woman and her doctor. And states, you may regulate it then as health care. That's what happened in 1973. At that point, by the way, abortion was criminal and against the law in all 50 states. All across the land, abortion was criminal. If it happened on the down low, under the table. Nobody was talking about it. So we don't even know how many abortions were happening at that time. You know, guesses are between 100 and 150,000 nationwide, but who knows? That's based on algorithms and guesses and things like that. So anyway, back to the court. So if the argument is we're going to have pro-life Republicans appoint pro-life justices and they're going to switch Roe v. Wade, that's our strategy, right? That's what we've been told. Well, let's watch what happens to the court for 20 years. We're just going to flash through here. What happens is Ford becomes president. He gets to swap out one of the judges. Then after him, we get the awesome Ronaldus Magnus, and he switches out 3 justices. Then we get Bush the first, swaps out 2 justices. This takes us up to 1992. It's now been 20 years, and the court is stacked. Stacked, 8-1 in favor of pro-life Republican appointees, right? In fact, there's only one dude left that voted for abortion originally. So we are now, for sure, going to overturn Roe v. Wade. And we have the opportunity to do it because a case comes before the court. Planned Parenthood versus Casey, right? And what does the court give us? They give us more abortion in a 5-4 split, all Republicans voting for it. And they make it worse. The court had previously said you can regulate abortion. To that, they now add states may not do anything that causes a stumbling block to get in the way of a woman who wants an abortion, or a hindrance. You can't get in her way if she wants one. So since 1992, any substantial regulatory legislation that might save some lives for real has gotten shot down by a federal court somewhere. They call it unconstitutional. So we're just now going backwards after 1992. So is that strategy really working for us? It is not. Abortion in the United States is brought to you by pro-life Republicans. That's just a fact. Okay, one final lie that we hear all the time, and that is that we have co-equal branches of government. How many of you have heard that in your government classes? And it's repeated all the time by politicians, and you'll just hear random news stories about bureaucratic battles going on, and they'll reference our co-equal branches of government. They're not co-equal. There's nothing equal about them. Each branch has a completely different job from the other branches, different responsibilities from the other branches. They have different amounts of power, and some of them can thwart others a whole lot more easily than they can be thwarted by them. Not equal. The only way in which they're really equal is in their duty to uphold the Constitution. That's the only way in which they're equal. Are you guys familiar with the game Rochambeau, which is more commonly known as rock, paper, scissors? I mean, imagine a game of Rochambeau where there's only 2 players, the Supreme Court and Congress. Guess who wins? Because they're not equal. Congress. Congress beats the court every time. Let me show you what the United States Constitution says in Article 3, Section 2. The Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, both as to law and fact, with such exceptions and under such regulations as the Congress shall make. Did you guys know that the Congress can slap the court down? So again, political Rochambeau. Look. We've got the court right here. Here's the power of the pen, Congress, the legislature. And it's like, rock, paper, scissors, beat the court. Rock, let's do best out of 3, guys. Rock, paper, scissors. Congress wins every time. It doesn't matter how many out of you do. They trump. They're not co-equal. Most people don't know that, and they won't tell you that. So why has Congress never dialed back the jurisdiction and the power of the court? Did you know that at least one congressman has tried using this mechanism right here? How many of you remember Congressman Ron Paul from Texas? Ran for president a few times. Pretty stout guy. Well, he ran a bill 7 years in a row from 2005 until 2012 called the Sanctity of Life Act. And it said that the Supreme Court shall not have jurisdiction to review any case arising out of any statute that prohibits the performance of abortions. You know he never even got a hearing in committee? We don't actually have representation. We do not have representation in Washington, D.C., and we do not have representation down here at the Marble Pork Pen on 23rd Street, because all these guys are not co-equal either within the legislature. Right down here on 23rd Street at our Capitol, we have 149 legislators, but they don't get to do whatever they want, and they cannot speak for you unless they're in with the leadership, with the top dogs that run the House and the Senate. It's the same here, and it's the same in Washington, D.C. So Ron Paul's bill never got a hearing. We don't have a solution coming from Congress. And obviously, we're not getting a solution coming out of the Supreme Court, reversing itself. Now, can the Supreme Court reverse itself? Well, sure, theoretically it can. And in fact, they're supposed to hear a case later this year. I might tell you a little bit more about it later, where they'll have an opportunity to self-correct. But I'm not holding my breath, and I hope you don't either. So who's telling us these lies? Sometimes we think in terms of right, left, Fox News, CNN, good guys, bad guys. But I got to tell you, it's the good guys that tell these lies too. And the reason that we've absorbed it kind of as a general Christian community nationwide is because of who it comes from. Here's who's telling these lies on the supposed good side. Groups like the National Right to Life, Americans United for Life, Students for Life of America, National Pro-Life Alliance, the Susan B. Anthony List. I just want to pause here for a second and say, if you've donated money to them and think they're awesome and follow them, I'm not telling you you're going to hell and you're a bad person. Please don't misunderstand. But I do want you to take seriously what I am revealing here to you and maybe take a closer look. And if that's something you're doing, maybe cut off the money to them. I'm going to show you here with first-hand source that what I'm saying is true. Probably the biggest dog on this list is the Susan B. Anthony list. They literally spend millions and millions of dollars on political campaigns every year on the ones that they have carefully selected, the politicians that are going to kind of follow their marching orders. Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you an interview with Marjorie Dannenfelser, the founder of Susan B. Anthony List, and she is going to explain to you precisely what their legal strategy is for ending abortion in the United States.
And so the presidency was our main focus, of course, in the presidential election along with the Senate. Our whole strategy has been to make sure that the Senate and the president can work together to change the court, to overturn Roe, and so that we can finally start passing laws. Okay. And it's really important that we stick with them all the way along as friends, as Christians, but most of all, what they need is really smart political strategy, and we try to help them with that.
They need smart political strategy. Before I cut this video, earlier in the interview, she actually says, now, I am not a legal scholar, and yet a not legal scholar is setting legal strategy for the entire pro-life movement to the score of tens of millions of dollars a year. Everyone looks to them for what to do. Let's put her quote up there again from the interview. The whole strategy is to make sure the Senate and the president work together to get new justices to overturn Roe, and then we can start passing laws. In the meantime, we can't do anything. So let's unravel this lie, this big lie. We need to talk about the hierarchy of law under which we live, okay? Hierarchy like a pyramid built from the bottom up. When there's a hierarchy, some are lower than other authorities, right? So we live in neighborhoods with HOAs that tell us how many chickens we can have. We live in cities that tell us we can't spit on the sidewalk. We live in counties that tell us how fast we can drive on gravel roads. We live in a state that, and on it goes. And it goes all the way up to Washington, D.C., where they try and control us and take everything from us. But there is a hierarchy. If you have a statute down at the county level that conflicts with a statute that's a state statute, the state statute takes precedence. There is a hierarchy here. So the question is, what is the highest law of all that trumps all the others, that applies to everyone, anywhere, anytime? What's the highest law? God's law, right? That's what we started out with. The universal standard that we all appeal to is the basis for our law. So what does God's law say since the beginning of time? That it's wrong to murder. You shall not kill innocent people. Everybody gets that. Did you know we have dug up, I say we loosely, I'm not the archaeologist, but we have dug up 4 or 5 law codes older than Hammurabi, older than Moses by thousands of years that say the exact same thing. Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't bear false witness. Okay, this goes all the way back, folks. God has made it clear how he wants people to behave with each other. So even if we had nothing else but God's law, what if our law did say, what if our Constitution did say abortion was okay? It still violates God's law. And if you're a chief magistrate, you're answerable to God. God sent prophets to not just the kings of Israel. He sent them to Pharaoh. He sent them to Nebuchadnezzar, the Moabites. God expects his people to live by his law, even if you're not in a revealed covenant, so to speak. Okay, so let's work our way down now. What is the next highest law in the republic where we live after God's law? It trumps all the other laws where it speaks. And that would be the United States Constitution, right? And it doesn't speak about a lot. It only enumerates about 17 things the federal government is supposed to be doing: deliver the mail, coin the money, organize the military, take care of international treaties, and the rest is up to the states, is what it says. And that's because the states created that federal document. And they weren't about to give away their power to this new federal beast. So they said, these are the things that you can do. But the U.S. Constitution, well, what does the U.S. Constitution actually say? Well, let's start in the 5th and the 14th Amendments, where we find, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So in our Constitution, the highest law of our republic, we have protected right to life and a guarantee of equal protection of the laws. Are the preborn receiving equal protection of the laws? So clearly, at this point, abortion is against God's law, and it's against our highest law in our nation. Okay, what's the next highest law after the U.S. Constitution? What's next on the list as we work our way down? Oh, wait, no. Just to be clear, the 10th Amendment, remember, says any of the powers that we didn't list right here in the Constitution, that we didn't delegate to the United States, they're reserved to the states and the people. Remember that in the 10th Amendment? So civil, criminal law, what is bank robbery? What is speeding? What is rape? What is larceny? All of that is criminal law, and it is the purview of the states, not the feds. So you got the 5th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 10th Amendment make it very, very clear that this is a state issue and it's a criminal issue. Okay, so now we're working our way down to what is next. We got the U.S. Constitution. What would be the next highest law? The state constitution. Well, what does the Oklahoma State Constitution say? In Article 2, Section 2, it says all persons have the inherent right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Article 2, Section 7, no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So we repeat in our state constitution the same guarantees as the federal constitution. And so now we work our way down and we get to what would be after the state constitution. We now get down to our codes, to our statutes in Oklahoma. Well, what I'd like to do now is just jump over here and point out Title 21, where we find the definition of homicide. Here's the definition of a homicide in the state of Oklahoma. It is the killing of one human being by another, And as used in this section, human being includes an unborn child. Did you know that Oklahoma defines the act of abortion as murder in our statutes? I bet you didn't know that, did you? Now, that's not the end of the definition. Let me go ahead and put up Part C of the definition where it says, homicide shall not include a legal abortion. So they said, abortion's murder, but not if it's a legal abortion. So an unlawful abortion is murder, but not a lawful abortion. Kind of hard to wrap your head around, right? So it begs the question, what is a legal abortion? What is this talking about here? Because this is crazy. It's self-contradictory. Well, you have to jump over to Title 63 of the Oklahoma Codes, and from sections 728 all the way down to 818, what you'll find is about 120 pages of statutes that regulate abortion as health care, and they actually are legalizing murder by abortion. Now, where did these laws come from? Why are they there? Well, you remember that in 1973, the Supreme Court said, states, you may regulate abortion. Now, under the statutes at that time, abortion was criminal. You were a felon. You could not procure an abortion. You couldn't buy one, get one, perform one. It was all against the law in Oklahoma. But after 1973, we began to legalize it systematically. And so over the years, year after year after year, your pro-life politicians, rather than tell the court that they're wrong, rather than say we will continue to protect innocent children in our jurisdiction, they went along with the court. They obeyed the court and began legalizing abortion, and it has not stopped since. For 48 years, they have been regulating this as a medical industry, and it has become a thriving industry in our state and in every state, and we're no different. So we've worked our way down the hierarchy of laws. You've probably seen this bumper sticker around town on the back of people's cars that says, let's just all get along, let's just coexist, everybody sing kumbaya. The problem is, items cannot coexist when they are logically contradictory. I just showed you that we have statutes that logically contradict higher laws. We can't coexist. We have to work out what to do with these contradictory laws. So I would ask you to consider tonight which laws are greater. On the one hand, we have all these pro-life statutes that have legalized abortion. But on the other hand, we have the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees the right to life and equal protection. You have state constitutions that guarantee the right to life and equal protection. And you even have state statutes on homicide. Which laws are greater? Which ones should apply when they contradict each other? There's no such thing as a round square. It's got to be one or the other. What do we do with contradictory laws? Not all laws are equal in status. We know that, we get that. And Jesus even talked about that and taught that there was a hierarchy of law. The Pharisees loved to debate the law. And there's many examples of that throughout Scripture where they're talking about, well, how do we apply these laws? And they do these thought experiments, and you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, but your ox or your son is down in a ditch, oh, I can't go help him, it's the Sabbath. No, everybody knows. Everybody knows, love your neighbor. The law gets trumped. The law gets trumped. Jesus taught that. So upholding a higher law might require not enforcing or breaking one of the lower laws. And so a really great example of that. I'm pretty sure the Allies were trespassing at Auschwitz, right? Okay, so thus ends the first section of teaching of laying the groundwork. We now understand the rule of law, that there's a hierarchy of law, there's a standard outside of the law, and when you have contradictory, evil, false laws that are down below or they're just de facto, we need to ignore them and apply the higher law.